But anyway, welcome everyone. This is our kind of first inaugural event in a series of events we're going to be calling Partners in Government. Bach Williams, closer? Okay. So Bach Williams and I kind of came up with this as I guess largely out of frustration with the fact that, you know, we're kind of politically involved, and we realize that we actually don't understand very well how government works. You know, from the Commissioner's Court to school board to, you know, Board of Education, we don't know how the decision-making works. And so what we thought was that we're probably in a similar place to a lot of other people, and that wouldn't we all benefit if we actually understood how decisions are made, with the notion that it would make us better partners with our elected officials, with any officials, in trying to understand how it all works so that we could work together better. You know, avoid the acrimony, but maybe have a situation where the community and where the elected officials actually understand each other well enough to reflect the values of the community. So that was sort of the idea. We hope to do this one 3 or 4 times throughout Precinct 3. That's sort of our mandate, is trying to spread the word in Precinct 3. And also we hope to follow it up with a series of other things, including something on county government, such as something on how the judicial system works in Texas. So that's our plan. So let's go.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Maybe it was stated in the initial note that I got advertising this thing, but what is your role? And I know you introduced yourself as your...
Great question. I would say, you know, Bach and I are just sort of concerned citizens, right? We're both precinct chairs for the Republican Party, but, you know, we decided that that's not really the kind of forum we're trying to create. The forum we're trying to create is one where we figure that people get enough information so they understand how their government works. And just as Republicans or conservatives, we're confident that we can win the war of ideas. So we just think it's important to have for people to understand how things do work.
Okay.
So that's sort of our background. Yeah. And please, ask questions as we go through this. So this is basically my introduction. And we're going to go through 3 separate presentations that we thought were kind of timely. Okay, Donna Bohorich is a former State Board of Education chair. She's going to give us an understanding of how the State Board of Education works. We're going to do kind of 20-minute-ish presentations followed by questions. And again, this, you know, we want to make sure that in this whole series that none of this is partisan. We're not here to grind axes or debate policy. What we're here to do is understand how what the roles of the different players are, what their responsibilities are, and what their limits of power are, because otherwise it's hard to have a sensible discussion. Dawn Champagne is a KISD school board trustee. She's going to speak as well on school board for KISD. And then Susan King, Susan in the back. She works for Fort Bend County Library Youth Services. She's a youth services coordinator, so she has everything to do with content that makes it into libraries for the youth. So again, a timely issue, but but one in which we just want to understand how that system works. So that'll be it. Then we'll have a few brief remarks at the end, and I guess off we go.
Well, I'm Donna Bohorich, as Robert said, and I was on the State Board of Education for 8 years. I just rolled off of the board, decided I ran for election twice. It's an elected position. You serve 4 years for each term, and I ran twice and then decided that it's time to give somebody else a chance to do. It's a lot of work that you do when you're on State Board of Education, just like a local board. It's quite a bit of work. It's all volunteer work. You don't get paid for any of that. They'll reimburse expenses when you have to go to Austin for meetings, but that's about it. So it's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And it was my full-time job. A lot of the board members have other jobs, and then they do that volunteer work. But I was blessed that I could actually, that was my full-time job. So I devoted quite a bit of my time over the last 8 years. My husband retired and he's like, when are you gonna have time for us to travel and stuff. So I decided after 8 years it's probably time to go ahead and let someone else do it. But I wanted to talk about the main responsibilities of the State Board of Education. Now, there are two responsibilities that you probably are aware of because you've heard about it in the news or seen reports on that, and that would be curriculum standards, setting curriculum standards for all of the grades and classes for the state of Texas. Now, what we don't set, the only things that are not set by the State Board of Education for what kids would learn, curriculum standards are what it is we're expected them to know in each class, in each grade. Those curriculum standards are set by the board through a process that takes about a year long for every single subject. Now, sometimes we go beyond a year if it's a really, for various reasons, it might take longer than a year, but typically, when you go through a revision process on curriculum standards and updating them, which is done about every 8 to 10 years typically, you don't update them every year, you just update them every 8 to 10 years. It goes through kind of a rolling timeline of going through all the subjects, and then you start back over again 8 to 10 years later, and you go through them again. And that's the way that the timeline works. So it takes a year. The work committees that are put together are all volunteers, so people like yourselves. It's typically classroom teachers who volunteer to do those work committees. And you'll have several drafts of the revisions that the board would consider, several drafts that the work committees are working on until they get to the very end after that year process, and they say, okay, we're finally done. We've got all the vertical alignment and horizontal alignment that you would want to see, and now the board takes it over at that point and then goes through an approval process, a lot of public comment, feedback before there's a final vote on those standards. On textbooks, that's the other main thing that you probably have heard that the State Board of Education does. So textbooks are now called instructional materials, but I'll just call them textbooks for ease of use. Those textbooks are approved based on their alignment with the Texas standards that you just set. So you do a year process to approve the standards, then you start on a year process where you have publishers turn in curriculum materials or turn in textbooks that would match what the standards say. Right now, the process, just before I left the board in November of 2020, I voted for the approval of the health and physical education standards. They had not actually been revised for about 22 years. It's been a long time since they've been revised. Because of various reasons, it just took a long time to get back to revising the health standards. And so they really needed to be updated. And so we went through a year-long process, had a final vote in November, and now textbooks will be approved in November of this year. And what we do during those processes, not only are the drafts of the curriculum standards available online for the public to kind of see how the process of revising the curriculum standards are set, but also the textbooks that were submitted for final approval, which would be at the November meeting for the state board. November 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th is when they'll be meeting next. Those books, the textbooks, are available online since like June. So you can actually read the textbooks because everything's digital now, as you know. If you've got kids in school, almost all their stuff is digital. And so you can actually see those textbook materials. That's actually one of the things that I did when I first came on the board 8 years ago, was everything was digital anyway. I didn't understand why you couldn't have a parent portal to look at the materials before they're ever approved by the State Board of Education. What had happened before, we made that change and required publishers to put it online, is that you physically had to go into one of the education service centers in order to even see what the board was considering, which is very non-practical, right? There's only 20 service centers across the state, and you'd have to go to drive to one of those in order to be able to see the materials. So I work with the publishers, I work with my colleagues, and we got that changed so that now if you want to be considered by the State Board of Education, you have to submit your materials to a public portal during the review time process before it's finally approved there in November, which for the health and PE that's coming up right now. So those two things you probably knew about the State Board. Curriculum standards, what your kids are going to have to learn in school, and then textbooks or instructional materials. The other thing that's very important that State Board does, and the only actual constitutional duty, is the Permanent School Fund. Permanent School Fund is $50 billion. It's a huge fund. It's the largest educational endowment in the country, larger than Harvard. We passed up Harvard several years ago for our educational endowment. And it's incredibly important to helping fund education. Education is about $63 billion, about $64 billion a year in Texas. And the endowment is able to contribute about $1.5 billion a year toward the state funding, the local funding that comes in to fund your schools. And so the responsibility as the fiduciary of that $50 billion fund is very important, not only for the kids today, but for the kids 100 years from now. And so that is something that is actually changing this as a result of some legislation. There was a governance, I would say a governance defect in the way that the Permanent School Fund was handled, was bifurcated, if you will, into two bodies. State Board of Education had part, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but State Board of Education was responsible for the investments. The School Land Board was responsible for taking in the earnings, if you will, off of mineral rights. We have millions of acres of offshore, onshore properties that was an endowment, a land grant, if you will, to the Permanent School Fund in order to produce revenue for the education system, and that's very important. And so the School Land Board did the management, and for many, over 150 some years, that money that was taken in was put on the investment side on the State Board. So you had two bodies. But a few years ago, there was an increase in ability of the School Land Board to start investing too. So as you can imagine, you've got one body investing and another body investing. You can end up having problems with, possibly even competing with each other, right? Like that makes no sense. And within the same fund, right? And so this last legislative session, they have fixed that. So they're going to create a Permanent School Fund corporate board. And 5 of the members serving on that board, it's a 9-member board, 5 will be State Board of Education members, and then 2 will be from the School Land Board, and 2 will be from the Governor's Office appointees. And I think that's a much better way to do it, because now we'll be looking at asset allocations all across the entire fund instead of School Land Board looks at its piece, State Board looks at its piece, that sort of thing. You're going to look at the whole fund and do what I think is the best thing. So I think it's going to be better for distributions particularly, and I think it'll be better for the health of the fund. So that's something new that'll probably kick in at full force in 2023. So I am very supportive about that new move. And it won't require a constitutional change from the Texas Constitution, because the State Board, as is in the Texas Constitution, is supposed to be in charge of the Permanent School Fund. So it's a really good move. The other thing that the State Board does is the final say on public charter schools that want to serve kids, the new ones. So if a new applicant comes in and wants to start a school up, they have to have strength in governance, administrative, educational, and financial areas. They have to have 4 legs of a chair that is intact before the commissioner will approve it, and then it comes to the board for a final up or down on any of the ones who were brought forward to serve kids. So it's a very rigorous process, and all public And all charter schools in the state of Texas are public schools. They're not private schools. All of them are public schools. So, and then the final process, I would say, that is one of the big processes we do is we do the graduation requirements. So if you will recall, I don't know how many of you have kids in the system, but a few years back, probably 2015, at that time period, there was a bill passed that made a change from what was required for every student. Every student had to do 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 4 years of social studies. They called it the 4x4. And we changed it back in 2015 to a pathways approach, which is more geared toward career interests. It's not strong like a major, but it's career interests. And so now, if you've got any kids that are in 8th grade or junior high, they're probably already hearing about it. 8th grade, they either choose, or at the beginning of 9th grade, they choose to go into one of these 5 pathways that are now available to them. Science, technology, engineering, math is one. So you have STEM, you've got arts and humanities, you've got public service, you've got multidisciplinary, and then there's business and industry. So you have 5 choices that your kids will have to choose. And I think it's a really good idea because you want children, the big dropout time is about your freshman year. That's when we have a whole lot of kids drop out of school. But if you're getting them kind of thinking about, it's not just about what you feel like today, but what you're going to plan for your career tomorrow, and have them think about that earlier in that junior high time frame, I think that can be a very motivating thing, if you will, to kind of look beyond school. Well, you might not like school, but you might need to be thinking about a career and where do you go from here. So that's something that was done at that time. So it's been in effect now, and I think it's been a very successful move, and other states have followed our lead in that area. And probably the last responsibility would be the State Board of Educator Certification, that we're the final approval on that too. That is an appointed board. It's called SBEC. SBEC decides what qualifications a teacher has to have to teach certain courses. And also, if there are problems with disciplinary or whatever, SBEC works on that kind of stuff. So if they change rules or requirements, the State Board of Education gives the final okay on that. So that's the major responsibilities. There are several other things that the State Board does, but those are the major responsibilities at the board. Now, where you can get involved with the State Board of Education is on those curriculum standards and textbooks. Our state board is probably one of the most transparent organizations that you know, in state government, that you can really see what's going on. It definitely rivals what the legislature does, because we make sure all of the curriculum processes, as they're going along that full year of revision, those are all those drafts are up, and you can submit comments and feedback all the way along. You can come and testify at the board meetings. So there's a great deal of opportunity if you're concerned about curriculum standards and wording, or you have errors or whatever, you can submit that feedback to the board members, and they are very interested in hearing from the public. So we made that process extremely transparent and easy to go to. Same thing with textbooks. You know, by requiring that stuff to be online and available, sitting in your pajamas in your home, where you can sit and log into a book and see what exactly is going to be taught in any area that's being considered before that book gets, and then be able to submit that feedback to the State Board of Education if you find errors or if you are concerned about content. That is an extremely important thing. And so I think that is one of the roles of government in general, is to figure out where the public has the most opportunity to be able to give strong feedback, and to make it easy for them. Just make that easy for them. Easy to find out where the materials are, easy to submit feedback, easy to testify. Those are the kinds of important things that I think government can really do well. And the State Board of Education has done a really good job in that particular thing. If you want to tune in to the health standards textbooks that are going to be approved in November, I can give you that information. Come and see me later. If you want to being part of the social studies revision on curriculum standards. That's going to be starting this next year. Right now, the application is open, and if you have an expertise or an interest in the social studies curriculum standards that are going to be revised this next year in 2022, that'll be a very robust and full revision. Then now is the time to apply to volunteer to be on a work committee to do that work. So I've got the way that you can connect with that process as well. So if you'd like to see me afterwards, and I can give you a short URL that you can plug into it, that'd be great. So happy to answer questions later.
Oh, thank you so much.
We do. Okay, sorry, I thought we were just doing. Sure.
How do you, can you explain how y'all work with TEA?
Yeah, that is really a good question, and actually a lot of people, it's a really kind of a strange relationship. The Commissioner of Education used to be selected by the State Board of Education, but they took that away and gave it to the governor. I don't even know when that was. That's been several years back. So the governor now appoints the Commissioner of Education, but he is a dotted line with us on the State Board of Education. Of course, I'm not on the State Board. I say us, I say we. I'm just so used to saying that. You have to forgive me. I'm not on there anymore, but still, I think of it as we and us. And so he's the actual secretary of the State Board. So every time we have a meeting, he always gives us a report. Of course, he reported on the sad news, if you will, about the COVID slide that the kids have been going through because of not being in school, and I mean, just pretty devastating, particularly in math. You know, we had, the year before, we had 50% of kids, before COVID, we had 50% of kids, and that's still low, in my opinion, at or exceeding the levels expected for math between 3rd grade and Algebra 1, right, for all the state assessments. And after COVID, now it's 35%.
Wow.
I mean, huge drop. And so English, or for reading comprehension, it's not as bad. It was about a 6% drop, but still a drop. And so we've got a lot of conversation that needs to happen with what do we do about this COVID slide, because you can't lose that generation of kids. You know, you cannot do that. You've got to make up that ground. And I know the school boards are, that's, I'm sure, a major part of the discussions you guys are having about how do you do that.
You stop shutting down schools and you'll have less of an issue.
Yeah. Shutting down, well, that's the issue. And actually, the commissioner has a long statistic thing on if you had 25% or less where you actually missed school, like you were in school 75% or more, basically, you had results from the state assessments that were at this level. If you were, you know, 50% or more out of school, your results were much worse. And so there's no doubt that being in school for most kids, I mean, some kids thrive, but it's a rare set of kids that thrive and can do this on their own with instruction about how to do it. Most kids need that daily, face-to-face, direct instruction, and that's just the way it is. We're just built that way. And so I think that's an important thing that schools are focusing on now. So,
I got a question.
yeah, oh yeah.
So what role, if any, does the legislature have in what you do?
Well, that's a good question too. So the State Board of Education role, just as would be for a local school board, really is at the pleasure of the legislature. The legislature really dictates what our roles are.
Yeah.
And so that can change from one session to the next. I mean, you can get an advancement or, you know, or they take away your toys. I mean, it's just, it's the way it works.
Well, but it's financial as opposed to being in the curriculum business.
No, it actually has got to do with duties. It's not so much financial as it is with your responsibilities, what your purview is, what you have say over.
Right.
And so that's why, to me, it's so important to be responsible about the transparency and engagement aspect when you're an elected body, to make sure that those things are strong and that people feel like they've had a voice, even if you don't listen, or sorry, not if you don't listen, but unfortunately we've seen a lot of, we don't listen. We don't like that. We don't like the we don't listen thing. Way too much of that going on right now. Yeah, I love to watch the school, the meetings that I've seen televised lately where people are like looking at their phone, they're checking their watches, that kind of stuff. You know, that's not helpful when the public is there talking to you. You want people to be engaged, you want to know that they're listening to you, and even if they don't agree with you, that's the word I meant to say, even if they don't agree, you felt you had a chance, you had your time to testify, you had multiple opportunities to testify. And that's what's so key about these kinds of things when you're going to make policy changes. And so, so as far as that goes, the legislature decides what our purview is and what it isn't. So.
And maybe one last question as a follow-up on that is, okay, so then let's kick in federal government.
Yeah.
How do they have strings in as well because of money and mandates?
Yeah, there's a lot of money. It's about 10% of the state budget for education comes from the feds.
Right.
The rest of it is state and local taxes.
And does that come with, again, hooks or?
Oh yeah.
Oh, but I mean on curriculum.
Oh yeah, we've got so many people at the Texas Education Agency just working on compliance.
Okay.
Why not just give up that 10%? I mean, I know this is going to freak Don out, but if we give up that 10% of the financing, we can do what we want here. We get out of No Child Left Behind. We can do away with the Texas waiver. We can quit teaching Common Core math to retard the development of math skills in our students. But I mean, it is a sacrifice. Like our district, how much would we give up? Like $10 million or something, or 10 or 100?
$1 billion.
Because we are a billion, so it'd be $100 million
$100 million.
to give. I mean, but if it's a choice over being able to actually educate our children or get some money,
It'd be a savings.
I think
Over the long run.
yeah, over the long run, it would be a savings because we'd have a smarter electorate, which probably is why the government doesn't want kids knowing stuff. But I just, like, it's always been frustrating ever since NCLV came out that the states have all just folded over 10% of their financing. And it's not like Texas is a poor state. We could find the money.
Well, okay, excuse me, could I
Yeah.
insert something, because that was my question. You mentioned that the private fund, the permanent fund, is about $50 billion plus or minus.
Yeah.
And it gives about a billion every year toward
Billion
the
and a half, yeah.
step. And so I'm wondering, what's the rest of that 50 billion doing?
It's earning money.
Well, okay, so it's earning
continuing.
money, but to
Right.
her point, you know, it seemed like, you know, we could easily give up that 10% of the federal hook
Yeah.
and pull more out of that.
But again,
that
you know,
permanent
I
fund.
guess we're getting into policy
Okay,
now,
well, no,
but I think
okay, yeah.
what's important is that we understand
Yeah.
that they do have hooks in, because that's one of the things I think everyone needs to know, right?
Yeah,
It's just
well-
that's because there are mandates that are associated with
They
money.
don't give you anything for free now.
Yeah,
No, nothing's free.
Yeah. No, nothing is free. That's true.
Because, you know, like the core math,
The what?
the core math that got implemented.
Yeah, the
You know,
Common
it's
Core.
like, I am an engineer, and I was trying to help my friend's kids, and I said, what the
Yeah, they're
heck?
learning not like you learned. for
I was
sure.
saying, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
2 + 2, you have to go through a rigmarole, you know?
Yeah. Pre-COVID, we actually, on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is NAEP, you know, Texas was doing really well in math, actually, comparatively. And especially considering the economic disadvantage percentage that we've got in our states, which is 60% of our kids are economically disadvantaged. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So, you know, they have more challenges. They come to school with less support. And so it really is a challenge for our state. And so I think those kinds of things are why federal money becomes attractive, especially for special education and other. School lunch is a big example
Well,
of how much money
just
comes in for school
put the
lunch.
hooks in all over the place. We'll give you the school lunch money, but then you've got to have the special education. But then you can only have 1% of your students in special education. But really, you've got like 7% of the population that should be in special education. And then you've got you've got to have those people have to take the standardized tests when they can't pass them because you have to meet these certain requirements in NCLB and then the Texas, anyway.
Yeah,
But-
now the standards, now just so you understand, assessments are state by state by state. And so every state has their own standards that
Right.
they set for curriculum
But they
standards,
all
and
have
that's
to,
that process.
but they
that I
all have
described.
to conform to whatever the illegal National Education Administration says, because they all had to apply for a state waiver to NCLB so that they could continue
Yeah,
to
they
get
all
the
have
money.
to meet the NCLB requirements.
But
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with state standards, not those state tests. Those are all set by the state.
The assessments?
You mean the STAR tests?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the STAR tests are based on.
Yeah.
Curriculum
the
standards that the
curriculum
state board
standards That the
approves.
state board approved, but those standards had to be approved by the National
they did
Education
not.
Administration through the Texas waiver.
No.
Dr. Huff's
That's
book
actually
on the
not correct.
downfall of American education, his whole doctoral thesis is about how the Texas state assessments meet the No Child Left Behind and how they have to.
No.
And the problem
They have to
with
meet
that.
No Child Left Behind with what is given on assessments. Like you have to give an English test, you have to have math tests, you know, you don't have to have social studies or science tests, but you do have to have 3rd grade through 8th grade, it has to be assessment every year. And there has to be an Algebra 1 test, and those are required by NCLB, but they don't set the standards
All right,
that we
then.
base those tests on.
Riddle me this. Dr. Hill also says that, these, well, he had a guy come in and show us the math STAR tests, that a huge percentage of the math STAR test isn't based on the ability of any child to do the math up until algebra. It's based on how many of the methods they know. They're like, what was the percentage you said? Like 30% of that test is based on whether or not the child knows one of the 7 methods they were taught to multiply this
That's
year.
why they're doing it, all those.
It doesn't have anything at all to do with whether or not the child knows how to multiply, just whether or not they know one of these 7 methods.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that's No Child Left Behind, all those methods. That's the Common Core math stuff.
So Texas, yeah, it's when Texas says they don't have Common Core, they have Common Core, because they're meeting the NCLB.
So if I can take you back to the development of the standards in Texas. This was during the George Bush administration, George
Yeah.
W. Bush. They had put a national panel together for what math ought to be. And at the same time, the state board in Texas, I wasn't on the board at the time, but at the time, state board had also was reviewing math standards. It was time for an update with math standards. And so actually, their report and our report ended up coming out about the same time on curriculum standards for math. But math moved toward not just rote knowing, you know, this is how you divide, this is how you multiply, but actually being able to break it down with those 7 methods. Like I said, I'm not saying that it's the preferred way or whatever, but the logic behind it was about having kids understand the math, not just do the math.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
because I've done a bunch of research on the Common Core
Yeah.
math.
Right.
So math experts across the board say about 10% of students can't learn rote math.
Right.
So these other methods are really good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But 90% of students can learn rote math and understand it, just sort of intuitively. So the whole math curriculum on Common Core is geared towards these 10% of students that can't just intuitively go, oh, okay, I get it. If I've got 4 apples and I want to have 5 buckets of 4 apples, I've got 20 apples. There's just a small group that needs this real visual idea of how to come up with their 20 apples in their buckets. 90% of kids don't need this, and making them learn all these different methods might be useful when they're going into teaching math at the university level, but it's not so great when you're like 7 years old and your mom is supposed to help you with math, and she's like, what?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
going
probably-
to use the power of the pen since we're moderating.
Yeah.
2 more questions, and one of them is going to be mine. Ryan. And you can beat me up later, all of you.
Oh, no worries. I was actually really curious about the social studies
Yeah.
changes. What are the requirements? You said an expertise requirement.
Well, just regular people can apply.
All right, I'll fit in. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
do you need to be a parent
No, I mean, the volunteer application is open to anyone to volunteer for that. Now, what you put on the application, obviously, when you get thrown in a pool of 600 people, which is what's gonna happen in social studies, you know, the staff is going to have to pick a panel of 12 people for K through 12, K through second grade social studies, and they're gonna look at the background, the resume that you submitted about your, you know, about the work you've done in social studies, because of course the topic is social studies. And so then they're going to select among that pool. So,
Are they choosing?
but there's no limitation on who can apply.
So are they, you know, from your perspective, are they already choosing past teachers or professors or?
Typically, they prefer teachers, and that makes some sense, right? These are classroom teachers, they know how to write curriculum standards, because writing curriculum standards is not as easy as it looks. And so, yes, they do prefer, and so 90% of the people on these work panels, or more, really, are classroom teachers in the classroom teaching the subjects. That's just typical. But that doesn't mean that you can't serve or can't be on the committees, and so you want to talk to your state board representative to say, look, I'd really like to serve because here's my expertise. You want to call your state board representative and say, hey, I've applied for this, you know, here's where I think I could really help with the curriculum standards development as part of these work groups, and I've applied, please, you know, approve my name. But in addition to that, there's no restriction on feedback giving to the State Board of Education. As I was explaining that process of providing feedback to the State Board, I mean, I've gotten, you know, tons of Excel spreadsheets from people. This is a problem. This standard was recommended. Here's why this is incorrect. Here's what we recommend instead. I mean, this happens from people who are very knowledgeable and not on the work committees.
Mary?
Yeah, no, there's a way to get feedback there, and it's very effective. So you don't want to skip the feedback to the board and think, oh, well, they're not going to listen. Yeah, they do listen.
Okay.
Yeah, so how much of the federal and state funds go to rural schools and urban schools? And as a follow-up, if a rural school district, Houston IC, for example, has lower, lower test results, lower graduation rates, do they get lower funds?
Okay, there is you probably know this better than I do, so you can speak to it. But I don't know the ins and outs of the formula, but it was the previous session in 2019 was the school funding formula session. You've probably heard, you know, headline after headline after headline about how they reformulated, you know, they had big commission on it, you know, had lots of testimony, they reformulated how they were doing it. So it's based on a variety of things that they give extra credit for. Like special education. So if your kid's been designated special education, the school will get more money for that special education kid to provide services. And that's the key. The special education parents are concerned about, are they really getting extra services for that extra money that's been given to the school in order to make sure that their kid gets the needed support, extra support.
Like this legislative session regarding girls and women's sports, like if they have a big program of that, they get more money for that.
Well, I don't know that that's in the funding formula, are you? I don't think that's in the funding formula.
Oh,
It's education specifically,
Like
like special education, like dyslexia, you get,
you would
there's like a
autism and stuff
dyslexia
like
bump.
that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but there's a variety of things that you get extra
Like
money
sign
for.
language maybe, if they do that in some schools, or those are at separate schools.
She would know more about that because they have to look at those extra
Okay.
bumps.
Okay. All right, shall we? Let's move on.
Yeah,
All right, just in
absolutely.
the interest of.
I'm here I answer questions afterwards too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Dawn Champagne, and I am sitting in for Rebecca Fox, who I think was initially invited, and
So is Greg and
so was Brad. Anyway, I'm third choice here. So I came, and he said yes.
Keep talking, keep talking.
Keep
All right.
talking.
So I will tell you that we have a 3-year term, and I was just reelected in May for my second term. So I'm fairly new to the whole political scene. When you go to any kind of things in Austin or Dallas, when they give you the school board training that we're required to do, you'll find that there's a lot of school board members who've been on the board for, 12, 15, 18, 21 years. So, when I say I've been on for 3 years, I think 3 years is really,
You just now figured it out.
yeah, I'm just kind of figuring it out. And it's, it's kind of strange because we have a relatively new board. Everyone on our board is new, except for Rebecca Fox, who was on for 15 years and then wasn't there for 2 years, and now is back again. So she has a lot of experience. Okay, so I'm going to just go through these slides. Okay, this is the basic job requirements, also not paid, okay? But we adopt goals and priorities and monitor success. We adopt policies and review for effectiveness. We hire and evaluate the superintendent. We adopt a budget and set the tax rate, and we communicate with the community.
Okay.
So adopt goals and priorities and monitor success. This sets the course and keeps the district moving in a positive direction. The board reviews regular reports from the administration and district on the progress toward the goals. So once a month we have a meeting and we have an agenda. Who really builds the agenda is the superintendent and the president. Now the board members, every school board, every school district, that has a school board, which is all of them in Texas, has their own policies and procedures. So our procedures say that for us to get something on an agenda, it can either be, the superintendent or the president, or if you as a board member, you have to get 2 other people to help you get it on there. Now that's just special for KDIC. Many other school boards have just 1 other person. So it would only take 2 people. Now if I could get something on the agenda with the help of the president, I wouldn't need 2 other people, but the president would have to agree to that. So that's how we get things on the agenda. But there is a calendar that every year is kind of on a rotation thing. January we do this and February we do that, and those are kind of transactional things. A lot of it does have to do with the budget, and there's a timeline for the budget, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the budget's sort of on a on a monthly type thing, building up to when we actually approve the final budget, and there's public hearings involved and all that too. So, adopt policies and review for effectiveness. The administration and district staff makes decisions based on district policies. Local school boards adopt policies that are consistent with the federal and state laws and regulations. This is something that Donna was talking about with the legislative decisions that are made. So, the session will happen, and then, we'll find out what all the new rules are and all this, and we kind of have to be in line with them. So, really, the school board is kind of an oversight of that, just to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, and that the policies are in place that represent the legislative changes. Also, we can instigate policy change also. So for me, what that has to do with a lot is something I'll get to in a minute, is community input. Because when we hear from the community, that's how I in particular, I'll just use myself as an example. If I heard of some concern, because I can't know everything, KDIC is 182 square miles, so I don't know what every sidewalk looks like. I don't know what every crossing guard's problems are. But if they reach out to me and and I think it's something that maybe we could do something about, then that gives me an end to talk to the superintendent to try to make a change like that. And, and we can review policies and change those too. Okay, hire and evaluate the superintendent. The board develops goals for the superintendent and evaluates the superintendent's progress. So for us, this isn't a mandatory thing set by the state or anything, but this is something that we do in KDIC, is we do quarterly evaluations. So we're going to have a quarterly evaluation. Our next meeting is going to be Monday night, And we'll have a closed session first, so we always have a closed session where we come first and we have our open forum. So this, the way the meeting is laid out can kind of be up to the board, but we are required to have a board meeting every month. And every time we have any open meeting, we have to allow for public input. So we start our meetings at 5 o'clock and people can come and, they have to sign up, but they can speak at our open forum, and then we go and we have closed sessions. So during the closed session, there's only certain things that we can talk about. We can talk about personnel, real estate, grievances, superintendent evaluation, and board duties. So the superintendent, we evaluate him 4 times a year, set by our own practices. And then in January is when is his final review or whatever. So, he was hired, our superintendent, Dr. Gregorski, was hired 2 years ago. So then last January, he was only given a 1-year contract. So then last January, we renewed his contract to be a 5-year contract. Because, the first year he was new, so we didn't know, so we just gave him the 1 year. So this January, he'll get his formal review, and that's when, his contract can be amended, his pay can be adjusted, and things like that in January. And that's a huge job, actually, for the school board. Okay, so this is what I was talking about before, is adopting a budget and setting a tax rate. The school board's role in that is to review and approve a calendar for the budget cycle, study the budget proposal, hold required public hearings, adopt a budget and approve the tax rate to fund it, monitor the district's fiscal activity throughout the year, and amend the budget if necessary, hire an independent auditor, and approve the report from the annual audit. So I will tell you that our CFO is Chris Smith, and he gets awarded every year, the Texas, the best, financial guy for school board, and all the time. He's always gets rave reviews from the state level. So, we rely a lot on his expertise, but, we can look at the budget and kind of, microanalyze it. Also, as board members, I can go in and meet with him and the superintendent and kind of try to figure out what's going on, with particular things. All right. So then communicate with the community. Board members serve as advocates for public schools, are the link between the school system and the public, and keep the community involved by informing them about district plans, actions, and accomplishments. So a lot of times at our board meetings, we'll acknowledge students or teachers that have earned, or administrators who have earned certain, things like, the robotics team might have earned some kind of major something at a state level, or, the cheerleaders from some high school might have won a state award or something. And so we like to acknowledge those things. But more than that, I think that the community input is very important. That's something that I really try to work with, because, as a school board member who lives in a house in a neighborhood, I walk around and go to the grocery store. I work at a Hallmark store. I, go to church, and I live amongst the people that I'm representing. So, I'll oftentimes have questions come to me, from when I'm trying to pick out my apples or whatever. And, I try the best I can, but school board members, we're very limited to what we can do. But I do think that what we can do is act as a liaison between that person and that person's concerns and the superintendent. And that's what I see as a big valuable role of a school board member. Okay. The ultimate responsibility for education rests with the state. Texas has delegated much of the authority in local school boards to govern the school district. And you can find KDISD's board operating procedures and policy manual on our website. And I did bring one copy of the board procedures here. So if anyone wants to look at it, you can, or you can look online, and what you do is you go to the KDIC website, and on the top where it'll say, have a pull down, and you can pull board, you can go to the board. And then from the board, on the right-hand side, there's a policy manual, and there's a policy for operating the procedures. So this is what kind of, for the first 2 years, it was actually in a bound little book. I carried this around my purse, and tried to really live by this because I don't want to, break any rules. And, there's people, and rightly so, watch you because they don't want you to break any rules either. So, and I've been, corrected or whatever, and, and I'll take the criticism. I'm here, I'm just a normal person, and and I want to be helpful, but I realize I'm not exactly perfect all the time either. How can you communicate with your school board? Well, you can email, mail, call, participate in public forum. And my email address is dawnchampagne@kdic.org, and I also have some business cards with that information on it. So normally, you can email me and I will respond back. A lot of times we do get emails that are directed to the entire board. And now I will say during COVID, there was a 2-day period of when we were talking about the mask in August. I think I had 800 emails. I did respond to 300 of them. But when you respond, so normally I don't have 800 emails. But when you respond, they'll have another question, and you'll have another question, then you have another question. So those 300 emails took about 16, 18 hours. And then I had to go be a wife and a mother and everything after that, Anyway, so I apologize if you've emailed me and I didn't get back to you on that subject because, I really did try, and then every once in a while I go back and I try to start off where I left off, and I don't know how many hundreds I got through, but I know I did at least 300 of them.
Well, if school boards stayed in their lane and didn't mandate medical choices for children, then we probably wouldn't have to worry about the 800 emails that you got. Not under your purview. So,
Well,
sorry you spent 16 hours, but next time, don't mandate medical choices for children. Stay in your lane, and you'll get fewer emails.
and also, what I like to say about that is, this is very important to understand, we do operate as a board, so I'm only one person, and, so there's 6 other people, there's 7 people on
Yeah,
the
but have a
board.
voice.
I do
She
have a
does.
voice.
I appreciate you, Dawn, because you're one of the only ones on our board that will ask a question during open session. Everybody else just sits there like, all of us in the audience know what's going on.
I agree,
And
I
we have
agree.
absolutely no clue.
I agree, but don't complain about the 800 emails, because
I'm
y'all
not-
did
I'm
that
not-
to yourselves.
I am not complaining about it, I'm only
Sounds like you're
saying,
complaining about it.
actually what I did was I apologized. I didn't complain, I apologized for not getting back to 500 of the 800.
You don't answer any of mine, so carry on.
Mom.
Well, I apologize for that too, so
It's
I'm
fine.
sorry. But
It's
all I said was I tried, I did not complain. I want people to email me. I would have come here and put my email address up here if I didn't want that. So, I do make myself available to people, and I cannot do things by myself, first of all. Second of all, I also can't agree with every single thing that every single person wants me to agree with. Because it seems like to me lately, everything, and I won't just talk about masks, but everything has been about a 50-50 divide. Now, I care about 100% of the people, I do, but I can't do what 100% of the people want to do. There's just no way. But what I can do is listen to you. And a lot of times, when I listen to someone that I may not agree with, most of the time I will actually say, I learned something from that. And I value being able to learn something from everybody.
That's to get the money.
Are
Dawn?
there also, I was going to ask a question, are there also, I guess there are associations of school boards, right? And I get the sense that in some ways it's like they write form legislation or form procedures for people to follow.
Yeah, they do.
Does that end up being a real hindrance for board independence? I mean, do people feel like they need to
You
follow
talking
the-
about TEA and
TASB.
TASB?
Yeah,
And so, you know, TASB provides a lot of services to us. And also TASB, by the way, TASB is Texas Association of School Boards. And Texas has 100% participation. I mean, TASB has 100%, like, in other words, every public school district is a member of TASB. So I've been asked before, you know, why don't we just leave TASB? Well, you know, we would be the only ones to not be in it, and with all the services that they provide, you know, we're required to have so many hours of education, so we get that from there. We get our insurance from there. You know, we get insurance, risk management from TASB, and we get it at a reduced rate because we're all getting, you know, so many of the school districts get it, and so we get the lump sum, you know, thing. Like if we were to go get insurance by ourselves, you know, it'd be very expensive. So, you know, they provide a lot of legal services for us, and they, I mean, you could look at TASB, they just provide, and it would be a challenge, I think, to not have them, you know, as our umbrella, I would say, to kind of help us. It's kind of like, okay, my son was a Boy Scout, you know, he was in a troop, but he was in Texas Skies. Texas Skies is who kind of was the umbrella over his little troop, you know what I mean? It would be really hard for a Boy Scout troop to function without Texas Skies or whatever other council there was that they were under. So that's kind of the way I look at TASB.
Yeah, I just wonder, because it seems like when you begin to have organizations as umbrellas, they offer services, but eventually you kind of collapse down to one view. And, you know, in my mind, you know, just you take 50 states in the union, the fact that everybody does things a little bit differently, the federal government hates that. They want consistency, because then it's easy to govern. But I just think it's a much better way to get to the right answer, because you got a lot of people out there experimenting. So I'm just wondering how, you know, whether that's sometimes a bit overwhelming to have an association that kind of sets a model for you that people don't feel like they can break out of that model.
Mm.
So it's just
Yeah, that's something to think about. And I mean, I guess you could go and see how the private schools are doing and the other schools that are functioning without, you know, the funding and all that. And I know people are for school vouchers and things like that, and, you know, maybe that will come into play one day. But, you know, but right now, the way that KDISD operates is under TASB, and under the guidance of TASB, I should say, and, you know, we follow a lot of laws from TEA.
So is it KDISD by itself, or is it under the guidance of TASB when it comes to like hot button issues recently, like that it's okay to discuss differences between boys and girls, what books that kids can read, and the recent news about this book that supposedly promoted critical race theory that was first taken out of the ISD schools, that was reinstated just a few days ago.
Okay, well, TASB doesn't really set rules for us.
Okay.
TASB is more like,
Group
you
think.
know,
It's advice.
It's advice. It's kind of like, it's kind of like if your child is at a school and there's a PTA there, PTA really doesn't have rules. You know, PTA provides services, but they don't make the rules of the school.
Okay.
You know, that's kind of a way to look at it. So SBOE probably has more to do with what's in the books and the curriculum.
Definitely curriculum.
And then TEA also sets that also. But now the school board, what our involvement with curriculum is, you know, so I'm not an educator, and I would never claim to, you know, I've educated 3 people, and that's it. That's my claim, okay? I'm not a teacher, so I rely on the expertise of the other people that are teachers and who are knowledgeable in curriculum to take care of that. But then we will do the final approval of it, but I'm relying on the expertise of other people. Now, if someone comes along, and I've done this, you know, someone comes along and they point out something that they think is wrong with part of the curriculum, then they can make me aware of that, and I have gone in and talked to the superintendent about things, and there have been things that have been pulled out of curriculum based on a conversation I had with the superintendent. So that's kind of where my power would lie, is more my relationship with the superintendent. Yeah.
Donna, one of the things that, I'm hoping that the local school districts, because they all have websites now, that they can move toward is an opportunity to, you have to certify, the school board chair, the superintendent, and the secretary of the board, school board, have to certify that what you have either provided or purchased covers 100% of the Texas standards that are set by the State Board of Education. You have to certify that. What's been a mystery to me is why it is very hard to get a list. If I want to know in social studies for, 4th grade for Texas history, I should be able to, I should be able to go on the website, and I should be able to find the resource that is used to provide that instruction.
I agree with you.
I don't understand
Our
why
website
that is
isn't that
not
good.
that's a transparency issue.
I agree.
It's just like when you go to the state board, you know exactly what the board has approved. You can actually see it before they approve it, and you can give feedback based on that before it's ever approved. But at the local level, you can't find that information out. Like, you have to dig through board notes in order to get down to what was approved, but it's not tied to a course. Do you see what I'm saying? Or
So what are they, I'm sorry, what are they approving?
curriculum that they're
The
providing.
actual, curriculum, so,
Yeah,
but you guys have set the standards.
we set the
and-
standards, but that's a baseline. Like, you
Right.
have to know these things
Right.
in order to successfully have
Right.
achieved this course
And
content.
locally,
But
they
they
can
can
select
add-
different
They
textbooks
can-
to
that
provide
either-
that.
But they have to provide 100% of that, but they can provide curriculum that goes above and beyond
Doesn't that, yeah.
what the board required. But I'm saying you still have to approve something that matched 100% of the
Yeah.
standards. And so I'm always confused as to why you can't find that list
And
online.
it's not just with KSB.
All of them.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's doing it. That's the thing that's confusing.
Well,
to me.
for example, if you went to curriculum support, on our website and emailed one of those people, you would get a list that way. But I know it seems like it's not transparent. The only thing I can say about our website is, first of all, they are redoing it because people kind of realize that, it's hard to navigate there.
Yeah.
And, I can actually make a request for that and see if there could be a link, for parents to be able to
Yeah, I mean,
access the
you've got a
curriculum.
kid in
I
4th
can-
grade,
yeah.
and you want to know.
I agree with you.
What is the school purchasing or providing to that student for
Mhm.
4th grade? I
Right.
just want to see it, and what
I'm
matches.
I'm going
And then you
to
can
write
review
it
it
down
as
and I'm
well.
gonna actually ask that question.
And now you have to provide, actually, this is something that happened in the last legislative session, is you actually have to provide, for sex education anyway, you have to provide that material that is purchased at the school cost if a person wants to purchase it now, which is
That's
really,
a new
it's a new
thing.
thing,
Mhm.
yeah.
So, yeah, I will look into that because, that and other
You have to
things.
certify it. So if you have to certify it,
Right.
you gotta know what's meeting those standards.
I agree with you. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and a statewide issue, I think so many school districts are sort of being a little shadowy over what people can see online regarding what they're teaching, that they're actually sending emails to the Attorney General's office, so he can actually push the school boards, the ISDs to transparently show the whole studies online to people who want access to them. They're going that hard.
I agree with you with that, but in the last legislative session, the governor actually said that CRT cannot be taught in the classrooms in Texas. So, the way I kind of see it is that each teacher is an individual person, so whereas CRT will not be allowed to be in the curriculum, it's hard to control what comes out of everybody's mouths, because you cannot be in every classroom, you know what I mean? I don't know, how many social studies teachers are there in 72 schools, you know what I mean? It's a lot of people. And so they're told the rules, and hopefully they're following the rules. But, we can't control, it's just one of those things. It's just, how can you monitor what every single person is saying? Hopefully they're following the rule, because we're not supposed to be teaching that.
So, Don, my understanding, and I could be completely wrong, is students are not allowed to film in the classroom, that it's like a level 2 violation for the student.
Yes, that's
So-
relatively new.
Might want to review that so that their students won't get in trouble if they're taking a recording of a teacher.
Actually, I would like to just hit on that for a minute. When I was brand new on the board in 2018, that became a new rule that
Yeah.
summer in the discipline management guide. And that's something actually that I fought against. But, like I was saying, I'm
Well,
one.
maybe Rebecca will be,
Yeah. Actually, email me, if y'all will, I know y'all are good at email, if y'all will email me. These things.
Actually, I
Kind
haven't
of
thought
keep
about
in
it
mind,
yet.
Like, if you will email me and remind me of the things that I'm making comments with, because I don't really I'm not taking notes right now.
So,
But-
what you were talking about where the procedures are located on the website for the board, does that manual describe what your duties are as board
The
members?
procedures, so the policies are the overarching
Yeah.
thing, and then the procedures are kind of like what I want to say. I don't want to say watered down. How do I want to say? It's more practical application of the policies
Okay.
that apply to the board members.
So, do you know, is there someplace where the duties of a school board member are located?
Yeah, it's in the operational. I have it here.
Right, okay, so it is in there. And where are the superintendent's duties located?
Some of them are actually in here.
In there too?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, so what do you evaluate the superintendent on? What are your general metrics?
Well, okay, so, and this is also something that started before I was there. They developed a strategic plan. It was a 5-year plan, and that's actually being redone right now because we're in the 5th year. Yeah, so anyway, there's a committee and the school board met and all that, but it was kind of challenging for me because when I came in, they were already like on year 2 of it or something like that, or year 1, and I'm like, I just really didn't, but when we evaluate him, so I have the binder, so I'll give you an example. They'll have all the strategic plans. You'll have plan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. And let's say one of them says, relationship with board members. I think that is actually one of them. And so you can go through there and it says all these different things, all these little miniature goals that he's supposed to have, And so we can go through there and me personally, I kind of put numbers by him. Like this is what I do. So this is a school board thing. Like if I was going to rate something, I'll just do like 1 to 10. And I'll say, I'll just put numbers on it. And then this is kind of what I do. I go through, add up my numbers, and divide it by however many things there were, and then that's what my rating is. That's how I do it. And then that's how I apply whatever rating that is for that particular goal of his. So then when we have the quarterly evaluations, we can also say, well, we don't like it that you do blah, blah, blah. And then he will write a note of it, and then we take record of that somebody said that we don't like blah, blah, blah. And then we can make sure that may not be actually in that strategic plan, but it will get added to like a sub thing. And then we can say, well, we still didn't like blah, 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 and we still didn't do this, but we still don't like blah, blah, blah,
So are the evaluation categories, are those public knowledge?
The strategic plan is public knowledge.
On how he's rated. So for instance, if I were to rate him, I'd say, percentage of funds spent on education versus administration. But so are those the metrics for him that the board evaluates him on? Are those public domain?
My personal evaluation,
Not your personal evaluation, just the categories against which.
the categories are public information.
Don, is it, I'm relatively new to this arena here, but is the school board broken out geographically so that if your kid goes to X school, this is the school board member that you call or
So
contact?
you're talking about single member district? something like that. Fort Bend ISD does something like that, by the way, no, we don't. But, Fort Bend ISD does, I believe, they do 3 from, if I were to imagine, 3 from one side of town, 3 from the other side of town, and 2 that represent everybody. And that's how they do it. So the way we do it is, okay, so it's by law that we have to be coupled with another election. So whoever a long time ago decided that we were going to be with the Katy proper. So we are usually with Katy proper, except for during COVID when we went with the presidential election because COVID, messed those things up. So anyway, so Katy proper is voting on usually their mayor, the city council people, and all this. And this is what I have figured out. So Katy proper represents a small percentage of Katy at large. So I think Katy at large has something like 125,000 registered voters. So, but let's say only 25,000 of them come from Katy proper. But 70% of those 25,000 come to vote for events because they care a lot about their city council people and all that. The rest of Katy seems like most of them could care less actually, because like they'll have 8,000 people come vote. Well, if you think about if 5,000 of them are from Katy proper, then 3,000 or 4,000 are from the whole rest of Katy. That's 182,000 square miles per hour. And I don't know why, and the thing is that I like to point out, is your school board member for the rest of Katy is the only elected official that you can vote on.
I've asked for that to be changed. It should be in November, it should be with general elections, but it's off-cycle intentionally. So, it's coupled with City of Katy, but like you said, that's hardly any of the district, of the Katy at large.
So that's why you get a 3% turnout.
Yeah.
Less, yeah.
Well,
And also you have a different polling place too.
Well, the early voting is very easy. I hope you can stop me when I answer, but early voting is actually very easy because it's at different schools. Like you don't have to live in that area to go to that school. Like you can live over here and go vote at Taylor, or you can live at Taylor and go vote at Morton or something like that. But on the voting day is specific to where you live. And so if you vote early, which most people actually do vote, or those 3%, those 3% of people are voting early. Most of those. It seems like except for in Katy proper, a lot of them do vote on election day.
Do you know who decides the coupling?
Hi.
Hi. Do you know who decides the coupling, and is that something that there's a process or a petition that could be done to try to move it to November or try to couple it with a different election?
So we could change it.
Who could? The board?
The board could change
The
it.
elections administrator does it.
Well,
Justin Graham.
so we could, but as I said, I'm one. What I mean?
I've heard Greg voice support for that.
I heard that too.
Because that seems like it would get a lot more engagement and everyone.
But I will say the one downfall to it, and this is what someone like Mr. Graham will say, is it's a financial, it's more expensive because if you do it in the presidential election, because we've already experienced this, you have a lot more polling locations, and then we have to pay a certain amount of money for each polling location. And so it becomes really expensive. I can't remember the figure, but I want to say $300,000 or something like that versus like $90,000. And so that's just something to consider. Although I had a good friend who's told me, but if you average in the average cost, like in other words, let's say we have 100,000 people vote the last half of school board. So 100,000 into 300,000, only $3 a person. But you only have 8,000 people vote. Let's even round it up to 9,000. If you have 9,000 vote for the 90,000, then was that $100 a person? You know what I mean? So if you look at per person, it's cheaper to do it in the November. But the overall expense is higher. That's just the way we look at it.
So my question was,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, but I appreciate the information being put out there. The question was, after you're elected, if my kid goes to Griffin and Beckendorf, do I have a particular school board member that covers those schools, or is it just anybody that I can call and?
I love that question. Because right now, no, legally and all this, no. But somehow, we've gotten into this habit of having feeder patterns assigned to us. And this happened, before I was on the board. So my feeder pattern this year is 7 Lakes. Now, you will not find this in any policy, procedure, anything like that. This is just something that happens. My argument is, I'm elected at large. I want to be everybody's school board member. You know what I mean? I want to be able to go to a KD Elementary choir performance if I want to. But right now, if that's your area, I'm your school board member.
So, but you're the one that's gonna show up at the activities at those schools for the 7 Lakes feeder pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not the 7 Lakes feeder pattern school board member at all.
Right, so,
But maybe you would have more sway in the school board meeting over 7 Lake feeder pattern issues?
not more to say with it. It would just be like, I would have a stronger relationship that year with those principals. Is probably how I would look at it, maybe the PTAs.
But maybe there's nothing wrong with that, because we've got over 100 schools, so this,
Right.
at least at the school level for each board member, it makes it so you don't have as much.
So I think that's.
But
why it
as a community
started.
member, I've been thinking about this too, because there was the woman who comes in and yells at you guys for not having enough black people on the board, like you have something to do with who runs, a couple of times last year, and I was like, but everybody's at large. You guys don't have any input about whether somebody who lives over in East Houston runs, or, well, I mean, east of
It has to be
Houston,
maintained,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, I know, but like, we've got Harris County people.
Right.
We don't have any influence of that over, or you don't, but maybe districting out might be useful, except I don't know that you get people who are interested in all of the different areas of running. Because don't we have a pretty, like, centrally
So
located around the
that
Katy
is
area?
actually a concern, and I hate to get into the weeds with that, but there would be the fear of certain areas wouldn't be as strongly
Would-
represented.
Or they wouldn't
something.
even seat anybody to run. That
No,
might-
I think they would seat someone, but, I mean, that's also a fear and also a bonus, you know what I mean? Like, it could be a really good thing, you have a single member district,
But
Because
that's something that you guys would
you would have
to do
stronger
over-
ties, like if you lived over in Morton and you were the Morton Ranch school
Yeah.
board member, you're gonna care more about Morton, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a Taylor mom, so I love all schools, but I really love Taylor, you know what I mean? I can't help it, but I love all schools, but you can't help it from where you're from,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Right, no, it's great. Guys, I'm loving the discussion. I hope you all are. Shall we go, Susan?
Where they can do it right there on site, and we also give them books to use for the summer if they need to. The other program we have going on is the 1,000 books before kindergarten. And this is one of my favorite programs because it's encouraging parents and anyone to read to children from birth on up. If your child is ready to read, and this isn't teaching them to read, but if they're ready to read by the time they enter kindergarten, they're more likely to be reading at level or on level by 2nd grade. If they're at that point by 4th grade, and their reading level is at level or on level, or above level, they're more likely to graduate high school. So that's how important it is for people to start reading to their children. And we talk about the early literacy skills, and our programming, our story times, and all that are tied into that. And it's very basic concepts: playing, singing, reading, writing, talking. And if you do that with a child, they're going to naturally start hearing words, start being able to visualize the words, and finally start reading. So that's one of our big things. And that's what our programs are kind of based on. So those are the kind of two big things we do, and we work with the schools on that. We also go to literacy nights at schools and promote library services. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about, one of the digital services, and you know, you can really help people in your neighborhood who have children, and actually adults, if you tell them about some of the, I think that's probably the biggest thing about public libraries. People do not know all the resources we have for them that are free. They just need a library card, which is free. So one of the big things we have is called Brain Fuse, which is an online homework help. 3 to 11, well actually it's 2 to 11, 7 days a week, you can go in to Brain Fuse and you'll be connected to a live tutor. This is from kindergarten through early college. And what it does is, well, what it does, it's personal. So there's tutors, they're all United States based, they're all specialists in their field, like math, and you'll connect to them. And there's a whiteboard. So you can go in, put your problem on, I'm just using that, but they do everything. And then they'll help you work through it, but they won't give you, they'll help you work to the answer, but they won't give you the answer. It starts off with very basic classes when you're young elementary, but then it works up to where it gets very expansive in the high school, early college. When we first started this, and this was back in the early 2000s, we thought, oh, our major clientele is going to be middle schoolers. It's almost always junior and seniors in high school. Now another part of it is that they have what they call a skill server. And this is where you can go in, even when they're offline, you don't have to have a tutor. And they have this huge number of practice sessions, anywhere from reading comprehension to the math skills to everything. And you can go in, and the other big thing that I always tell parents about is they have practice for STAR tests in there. So you can go in, because we always get asked that. Is there something we can study to practice for the STAR? But these have some practice sessions. Then there's another section that's the writing. And if you have a resume, if you have anything, like a paper that you're doing at school, you can submit it, and with 24 hours, you'll get it back with recommendations. And they'll say, you probably need to work a little bit on this or whatever. And I had my daughter, because I wanted to see what happened with it, I had her submit a resume. And within 24 hours, we got it back, and it did have some recommendations in it. That's cool. The other thing...
Are these library employees around the country who are doing
No,
this?
these are just specialists in these different fields.
If you have a library card to do this?
Yes. Now, if you're in the library, you don't need a library card. But if you're outside, and I've got bookmarks I brought about that.
But all libraries do this, or just your library?
Fort Bend County Libraries. It's a contract we have with them.
That's
the company.
It's online?
It's online.
So you just put in your library card number?
Well, you don't need, well, what you do is you go into our website, and then you go into Brain Fuse, and I've got the thing, you click on it, and then you have to type in, because we're paying for Fort Bend County residents, for people who have Fort Bend County library cards, because if you're in Harris County, you can still do it. So, so the resume writing, that kind of stuff. And then also they have like computer classes you can do on there to help your skills. They have citizenship, all that kind of thing. So I think that's...
How to
yes.
get there again?
I'll have a bookmark and I'll give it to you after and show you
Okay,
that.
thank you.
But if you know families who have, because we get so many people come in and say, I you know, the math is beyond me, or, you know, my child is having problems with reading comprehension, is there anything that we can do, you know, to help them? And we kind of recommend at least that skill surf and things like that to do. There's also several other things we have. One's called Learning Express, and it kind of does similar things. But again, I think that's why I like coming out, talking to people, because they don't know what all we have to offer the community as far as different things.
You just need to advertise better.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these things are amazing.
And, you know, we try to do it, but it's kind of like, sometimes I think, only when you have the need for it do you really realize it's there. Yes.
I've been trying to help my mother get into some of the, I guess, learn how to use a computer 101. I've tried teaching her, she doesn't take, so I'm going for alternate sources. I'm seeing that Fort Bend has that, but all the live sessions are booked. So there was another one where it was kind of like a video, a YouTube video.
Right.
So.
And we're moving back to in-person gradually, so hopefully those will be back in person. Because that's really where, and we get so many seniors who need, and they just get thrilled to be able to, you know, I mean, we have something as simple as like learning how to use the mouse, or learning how to do Word, or something like that, so yes. So keep checking the calendar on our website.
Okay, so it's a temporary shortage issue, not a structural.
Yes,
Okay, awesome.
yes.
The practicing your skills bit, is it skill surf or skill
Skill
surf?
surfer. That's, yes. There's-
Like, can you pantomime? Are you surfing on a surfboard or serving a
Yes,
surf?
surfing on
Okay,
surfboard, yes.
thank you.
SURF.
Yes.
I
Is it
discern.
possible to further promote the library systems, like maybe through a local newspaper or a magazine, and people will pay more attention? Because I love books, I've always been a library guy. That's how I knew about this library, this incremental one, and they're building the full share one. So apart from like elections and stuff, people can know that the library's always there.
And you know, it's funny, we have a whole marketing and communications department, and each month they put out to all the newspapers and all that. It's just, yeah. That's one of our biggest things, is to do that. And that's one reason
You
we
could
go
run
to
a
all these
Facebook
schools.
ad that would hit everybody in Fort Bend for like $5 a day.
I'm sorry, what was it?
You could have them run a Facebook ad that would hit just about everybody in Fort Bend for $5 a day.
And you know, we even have a Facebook page.
Yeah, like, it's very simple to do.
Yes.
You know, I'm wondering if you got to partner with TASB as an example, since they get news out to all the school districts. And people read that TASB newspaper. I'm just saying, if board trustees knew these kinds of resources and would make sure that,
And more teachers do.
yeah, I
Because the
mean,
teachers get
I
scored
never heard
really
of
quick.
this, and that's just remarkable.
And this is like, for example, I don't want to interrupt you, but at Taylor, they have a thing called Taylor Made. And those are tutors, this is just a thing that they started a long time ago, but it's free for the students. And they're mostly like retired teachers who just volunteer their time and they'll come to Taylor. And not just Taylor kids, anybody can come and do it, but they'll have free. But this would be another resource for them, but I
Yes.
don't think that they know about that.
Yes. And that's what's great about, you know, connecting with school board members or school, is that to get the word out, that this is there, this is for the community. And the other thing I want to say is about these tutors, they go through strict evaluation before they ever get in, and background checks and all that. And there's no way for them to kind of form a relationship or
Right.
anything. You can't ask for the same tutor.
Right.
The tutor can't, you know, go back. So, like even when you send in your papers, it's sent to like what they call a blind mailbox. So they don't know who that's coming from, and the student doesn't know who that's coming from. And what I'll do sometimes is, and this is just a little funny story, well, it wasn't funny at the time, but they keep logs of all sessions. So the headquarters is in New York, so they're an hour ahead. So one morning I get to work at 8, my phone rings, and it's our rep with Breakthroughs, and he said, well, Susan, we've got a problem. And I said, oh, and I'm thinking, okay, what did their tutor do to, you know, he goes, we had a middle schooler harassing one of our tutors last night. And they had the whole thing and they sent it right to me. I was like, oh geez. So, I mean, they keep strict tabs on her. So that was really good. The other thing is a classroom, like a teacher can't send in 20 papers to be graded or something. It has to be individual. So,
That would sort of be
I think someone's right.
well, someone actually tried that in another school district. So, yeah. But it's, another way to help, you can always recommend books. We have suggest a title, and we have an email that you can, I check every morning. I get emails when people are asking questions on how to do this or how to do that. But we also have other ways you can help. We have what we call the literacy circles, or conversation circles, where you work with people who are learning English and you kind of just have a conversation with them. There's also the literacy tutors that the library has for helping people. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. We have our friends groups that you can help volunteer, and they raise. Our programming is only paid for by what the friends raise through donations. It's not paid, the county does not pay for programs. So all of that comes through the friends donations. The books, of course, they pay for, but not that. The other thing we have something called launch pads. I was even going to bring one tonight. It comes in a little orange case, and one of the things we started a few years ago was with the launch pad, is that a lot of children may not know how to use apps, educational apps, they know how to use a lot of apps, but not. So these are education-based apps like math, and they'll teach math skills like division or multiplication or something like that. So those are all available to check out from that. So it gets them their technology, but in an educational way.
Super.
Any other questions? I can talk all night about what we have. I think you're probably used to that. But I'll have bookmarks about those things later on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, I guess it's back to me. So,
Nah, it ran out. I saw it blinking.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the other one?
The other one's there. Do you have the keys?
That's all right.
I can get
It's
more.
all right. I'll yell.
Huh?
I mean, it's this kind of closing remarks.
Yeah.
So, I want to thank all the speakers, and you guys were great. Thank you for fielding questions and giving us, a bit of understanding about what y'all do. And if there's anything else you want to close off on?
Yeah, I wanted to read this summary. This is something that I think you'll be interested in. On the last last legislative session, there are a couple of transparency bills that I think were really important. As part of the CRT bill, which was Senate Bill 3 that was passed, it increases the transparency for parents by requiring school districts or public schools that utilize a learning management system or any online learning management portal to assign, distribute, present, or make available instructional materials to students, to provide login credentials to the system or portal to each student's parents. So this was something that school districts ought to be working towards, making sure and providing. That will help with what we discussed earlier about the lack of, you don't know what is being used in any course and you don't have access to it. So this is a huge move forward. And then there was one other one, which the local school health advisory committee, which is the SHAC, and that decides your health curriculum, etc. Meetings are required to have a written and audio or video record to be published on the school district website, if the district has a website, which they all do. The SHAC must meet at least 4 times per year, 2 public meetings, must provide recommendation to the school district's human sexuality instruction, and a school district now must obtain written consent to opt in to a student's parents, by a student's parents, in order to provide human sexuality instruction. It's It's not an opt-out
Opt-in.
anymore.
Okay,
It's
awesome.
an opt-out, or opt-in.
Okay.
And that provision is to expire in August of 2024, but if it gets renewed at the next legislative session, of course, that will go on. But right now, that provision is in that in order to provide human sexuality instruction, you have to obtain an opt-in from parents.
In other words, okay, just to make, I'm sure I understand what you just told me, so if I don't opt in,
They don't.
Then
they
they'll-
You
take
don't
it.
attend it,
Yeah.
right?
Right, and
it's
there's
right
no
now.
penalty or anything like that.
Why is it set to expire?
Because that's probably the only way they can get it passed. I'm just
Okay.
guessing.
Effective December 1st, probably.
Let me tell you what bill it is, and you can look it up. It's House Bill 1525, Section 7,
Thank you.
is where it is, but I don't see the date for
Effective date.
effective date. I don't see the effective date. Usually they're September 1, but I don't know.
Well, but for the, we've
Well,
got so
even
many
the-
specials.
Well, the
know.
specials ended up being September 1 on some of those cases. But
Okay.
anyway, look it up and see
Thank
which
you.
it is. But those are two transparency things that are really big. Because, and that's what, as parents, you need to start pushing the school districts. Hey, you're supposed to provide a public portal for me to see this instructional material.
That's great.
Yeah,
Because I mean, I think it kind of fits so much into our theme now. I mean, we can be better partners if it's more transparent.
If there's more transparency, and that's why I've had issues with the National School Board coming out and trying to call in the feds, you know,
Eric, come and save
regarding
us from
school
getting-
boards, which didn't make any sense to me because, I mean, there a lot of times, if somebody gets out of line in a school board meeting and is it threatening, what a school board member would do, of course, would talk to the local sheriff and say, hey,
Take
can you
care.
go visit that guy? Because that was way out of line, you know, and then that usually takes care of it. But why in the world would you call in the national?
Because it was political mileage.
I know, but it didn't make any sense,
make any
you
sense.
know.
I was proud when I read that the Texas State Board of Education was like, no, we don't want anything to do with you guys anymore.
Yeah, that was really good on Kathy's part. I think that was smart of them.
Well, I'm really mindful of the time contract we made. We're kind of coming up to 8 o'clock. So, let's see. On the way out, we would love you guys to scan the QR code.
I did already.
You did already. Okay. And give us some feedback on this stuff.
Perfect.
We're going to do this particular presentation, if you will, a few more times in Precinct 3 is our hope. So tell your friends. I mean, to anybody you know. We try to get the word out, but like we've talked about a lot, take up on email invitations, Facebook invitations is, habitually low. So just word of mouth, I think, works better. And we're going to do 2 other ones that are scheduled, and we want your input on other things we might do. But we're going to we're going to have judges here next time, from Justice of the Peace up to the Court of Appeals, talk about the Texas judicial system. After that, we're going to do county government, and then after that,
Whatever you feel
whatever
like,
you
we're
guys
going
feel
to
like you
try
want
to
to learn more
organize
about.
it for y'all.
Because I don't know about how y'all felt, but I mean, this was a really educational session, I thought, for all of us. And I feel better equipped to discuss this stuff tomorrow and understand what I can do.
Yeah.
I hope you all felt the same way.